Let's talk a little bit about hard skills versus soft skills so we get a differentiation of what it is that we're talking about here. We've all in school gone through the hard skills training in the study of arithmetic, in spelling, in grammar. These are fundamental hard skills that we all need to have as part of our discipline. But hard skills in and of themselves are very, very deterministic and very process-driven. And that word process-driven is critical. With hard skills, you can reasonably predict what the outcome will be. That's a critical point. You can reasonably predict what the outcome will be. So we can sort of, as a metaphor, think of hard skills as riding on a train. A train sits on a track. It has a specific schedule. It has switching mechanisms that get it from point A to point Z, the way it needs to go, but it can never deviate off those tracks. That is essentially what a hard skill is. It's algorithmic. It is very, very unambiguous. Unless a car or a cow runs across the track and stops the train, but we know what the outcome is. By analogy, a soft skill would be like a car. So you may have a map or GPS, for those of you who have never seen a map, and you can navigate freely. You're not stuck on a track that takes you from point A to point Z. You can take many, many, many routes to get from point A to point Z. You can be very, very creative about how you take these many routes. For example, we had an idea some 25 years ago. I had my own company in digital cartography, which is essentially the maps that you see online today. But we had a unique application. Unfortunately, it was too early and GPS wasn't fully developed yet. But the application was called Get Lost. It was very humorous. But the idea was to allow people to literally get lost. So Friday afternoon, your girlfriend turns to you and says, "What would you like to do this weekend?" To which you answer, the way we always answer, "I don't know, my dear. What would you like to do this weekend?" And this goes back and forth. And in the end, you either do nothing or you do something silly. What our application was going to do is, using your personal profile, we would allow the map to decide for you. You would have no idea where you were going. It was like jumping in the tower from the earlier example I gave. You actually had no idea. You were going into the unknown. But the navigator, the application, would decide for you the restaurants, the museums, the roads you would take, the tourist spots you would visit, and that sort of thing. Regrettable that we weren't able to do it, but that is an example of what a soft skill approach would be using a given set of technology. It's creative. It is by definition ambiguous. You don't know what the outcome is. And the final thing that we had already talked about is that it's user-oriented. It's not a surprise that in today's world, with new technologies and the introduction of new technologies into the market, one of the key words that the venture capitalists will always ask is, what is the use case out of which you develop a financial model? Use case, that terminology did not even exist 30 years ago. Or if it did, it was in very sort of abstract academic circles. That is a critically important feature. How, given a piece of equipment, how will the user actually use that piece of equipment? Let's also go back for a second to the wine example, because that's sort of so apparently out of the realm of technology, but very much in the realm of creative thinking and the difference between a hard skill and a soft skill. So we've known for thousands of years how to make wine. Right. Pretty simple formula. Put grapes into a barrel, let them ferment, pour out the contents, you have wine. But then you add changes to the methodology to make a better wine. or a different type of wine. And that's been going on for thousands of years. And then, in the 20th century, we had a bit of a change that most people aren't really aware of, invented by a Russian from a noble family by the name of Andrei Chelistchev. Long story, wonderful to read. There's a documentary film that if you can ever have a chance to see called Andrei, the Voice of Wine, I would highly recommend. But Andrei Chelistchev, one way or another, in 1930, I believe, 7, ended up in California, hired by a wealthy winemaker who said, or winery owner, who decided he wanted to make California wines as good as French wines. That's a big order. And decided that the right man for the job would be Andrei Chelistchev. Well, in fact, Andrei Chelistchev was the right man for the job. And one of the things that in the process that Andrei Chelistchev did has impacted every wine drinker on the planet today. And yet you don't even know this. It applies to white wine specifically. Something called cold stabilization. Nobody would have thought about this, but the idea was very simple. Slow down the fermentation by wrapping cold water tubes, pipes, around the fermenting tank. So it actually cools down the fermentation. And instead of 2 days, you can now go 7 or 8 days. Why? Why do that? Because in the process of slowly fermenting, you extract much more flavor from the grape. Grapes, for example, like Trebbiano or Malvasia in Italy, which are very inexpensive grapes used everywhere as bulk wine. Using techniques of cold stabilization, the Italians have started producing world-class wines from these completely obscure grapes. Not obscure, just completely non-interesting grapes. So it was applying very novel solutions and much needed solutions to problems that people didn't even necessarily know they had. But Andrei Chelistchev was an embodiment of a creative thinker. The reason I mention him specifically is because I don't want to confuse anybody into thinking that creative thinking is relevant only in the world of technology. You know, computers, mobile phones. No. Creative thinking applies to every single thing that we do in our lives. And the examples are everywhere.